First, we have to discuss what the story of Poppy Playtime is, and if it can relate to anything currently in the FNAF world. What we know about the company that seems to be the main antagonist of Poppy Playtime series, called Playtime Co., is also basically the story of the game. They seemingly hit it big in the 1960s with the release of Poppy, the world's first truly intelligent toy. This Poppy doll put them on the map, marking them as the king of toys until dolls fell out of style in the late 70s, causing Playtime Co. to have to update their repertoire and come out with newer toys like Huggy Wuggy and Candy Cat, among others. This helped them bring back some of the business they lost, but this didn't seem to be enough. They soon began seemingly experimenting with more realistic dolls in an attempt to recreate Poppy's success, because let's face it, even if there was a truly intelligent version of Poppy, not every version of Poppy would be like that. Only the one they used in commercials and later we release at the end of that chapter, just like how ice cream in commercials is really mashed potatoes. Yeah, sorry. Sentient toys, however, are nothing new to FNAF, so William wouldn't really feel like a stranger. Of course, we also have to decide what version of William comes over. If it was William, Springtrap, Scrap Trap, Burn Trap, Glitch Trap, or maybe even Dave Miller, William's alias while he was on the run and underground in the Silver Eyes novel. Because the Springtrap personality or persona is very different to the William Afton persona. Springtrap is a very aggressive personality compared to William, who is sneaky and calculated as opposed to Springtrap's direct approach. So assuming that since this story revolves around people more than the toys, who are definitely instrumental but not as important like they would be in FNAF, in this case we would be going with William Afton specifically, because he needs to be able to sneak around and do villainous things, whereas Springtrap would likely just end up being a toy. Well, actually, if we think about it, maybe we can work two versions into this series. So, if Afton was in Poppy Playtime, he would probably just end up being a higher up at the company. Just because he doesn't seem like a man who sees living doll or truly intelligent doll and then doesn't do anything about it. Okay, look, if Afton's coming over, his story has to come over as well. It can't be just some random dude who's named William Afton. So he would have to have the story of wanting to bring his kids back. So, after hearing this, he would start at the company and eventually work his way up. By the time the actual game comes around, I'm guessing that he'd be pretty high up, like on the board of directors or shareholders or whoever it is at least. But I think that he wouldn't be CEO or close to that, because he doesn't seem like that type. He'd have worked his way up because he doesn't seem like the kind of person who likes working for other people, you know, like he likes to be in control. Hence why his targets for his crimes are kids, since they're easier to control. So he'd be a higher up at the company, and not the top because he wouldn't want all that attention, and it would probably have been his idea to try and recreate the success of Poppy with new toys, since his goal of bringing his children, or at least the crying one, back would kind of still need to be there for this character to make sense. Like I was explaining earlier, he kind of need to have that, otherwise it's not William, it's just some guy. Although everything associated with the pizzeria in his story could just be a separate entity within the Poppy Playtime world. As a reasonable extension of William being the one who suggests these experiments, I'm also going to be guessing he's the one conducting them, since if nobody can do it right, you gotta do it yourself when it comes to creating human toys. That sounds weird. This then leads him to create Experiment 1006 that then escapes, like we see during the events of Poppy Playtime Chapter 1. So Afton's voice would be the one that we heard on the tapes. This would probably mean that he's actually dead, because, you know. But no. So instead, since he knew about the risks, he would take those into consideration and would probably have a backup plan if anyone or anything ended up going haywire. Probably something that turned himself into a toy or something similar to give him enhanced strength and stamina, as well as just keep him alive longer. No longer needing to eat and sleep. Thus, Springtrap is born. Well, the Springtrap that would be in this universe. So here, Springtrap wouldn't really be an animatronic suit that Afton got spring locked in, but rather the toy that Afton would have turned himself into. willingly, might I add. But they'd still remain largely the same, since both have Afton's organic body inside them, yet still enhancing it in some way. So after we knock down Huggy Wuggy, we go to release Poppy, thus ending the first chapter. My idea would be that this is actually what William wanted all along. Or maybe not what he wanted specifically, but something that would draw him out. Knowing that the only true working human toy hybrid is actually out and has been released from its prison would certainly entice the man that just wants to use this technology to bring back his son to come out. So in chapter 2, if William was in Poppy Playtime, he could reasonably be the villain that we'd be fighting. Experiment 1007, if you will. So he'd come after Poppy so that he could study her and make sure he knows how to bring his son back. Well, maybe. However, he would soon learn that the secret to recreating Poppy was that the person becoming the toy would have to be willing to do so, like Poppy's human and William were. Yeah, because William willingly turned himself into a toy to survive Huggy, he's also one of these perfect human toy hybrids, meaning that to become a toy, the person would have to be alive, which would send William spiraling and probably turn him into the Springtrap we all know and love, but also hate. For me, mostly hate. He needs to die. Hell, you know what? Just for literary significance, he may even just set fire to the Playtime Co. facility just out of anger. Because honestly, that would make sense given the history of this character in the other franchise. We'd obviously end up surviving this fire though, and Springtrap would later become the main antagonist, while we spent our time fighting off the other experiments that escaped. So we'd have 5 additional chapters, at least after chapter 2, where we'd fight experiments 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, and 1005, assuming that that's the scheme that they'd be going with. But the whole time, we'd wonder why Afton didn't kill us directly, and instead just tried to crash the building down on us, which in reality gave us plenty of time to escape, which would also be a big mystery of the game and the ongoing chapters. He could have had us by the throat and then let go to run away. And we wouldn't know until the final chapter that the reason is because we are either Afton's child or the toy of one of his kids, which is why he released us and gave us a chance to leave, resulting in a final battle between father and son where he realized that it's him or us, meaning he doesn't care if we're his son. He's seen how fragile this form can be and is now in the form of Springtrap known as Scrap Trap. We end the fight by burning down the building with us inside as well, alluding to FNAF 6, killing all of us, or at least it seems that way, because, you know, he always comes back. In the final chapter, we get one final scene of something crawling out of the burnt down ruins of whatever warehouse we were in that stored all the Playtime Co. toys. And as we zoom in, we see bunny ears. And the most recent form of Springtrap, Burn Trap, emerges from the rubble, and the scene cuts to black. Poppy Playtime may be over, but Burn Trap's playtime is just beginning. That sounds kind of creepy, considering how he wants to lure kids to the back of pizza joints. Firstly, we need to ask, what is Experiment 1006? This experiment is first introduced to us by name in one of the death screens that we can see after we're killed by Huggy Wuggy. This screen says EXP.1006, isn't he wonderful? Before putting us back in the game. EXP in this case is referring to scenario, not experience points, unfortunately. The next time we hear a mention of this is actually at the end of the chapter in the final tape called Unknown, where the unnamed scientist says, final log in relation, Experiment 1006, the prototype. Coordination and cooperation is evidently within his skill set, as well as the skill set of all other experiments of his type. Though still missing, today's events are no doubt in relation to him. His absence was a flawed scientific process, which should have under no circumstances been left unaccounted for. That's why I'm making this log, so that the same mistake won't be made twice. Any future experiments will need to be contained and disposed of in a secure location. I'm not worried about myself. One breakthrough and I'll be back. We must forge onwards in the name of science. But for those who are beneath us, understand intended or not, end note. And the final time we hear about this experiment is actually in the background text for the trailer of the game. This section, present at 43 seconds, says Experiment 1006, the prototype. He seems serviceable as the prime example for the type of vessel which we are trying to create. Despite his digestive tract being wired properly, the prototype finds no necessity for sustenance, unlike the others. All other experiments can survive while subsisting on much larger portions. Now, this is all well and good, but what does all that information actually tell us? Well, thanks to the trailer text, we know that whoever Experiment 1006 is, they looked like they could be the template for the other experiments going forward. Their naming system also seems to indicate that they were the 6th attempt at creating such a creature, as indicated by MapHat, which I guess makes sense. We also know that despite having a digestive tract, the experiment doesn't need to eat and doesn't seem to try and eat based on the wording of the actual phrase, saying finds no necessity for sustenance instead of just has no need for it. We also know that they went missing and at the time of the final log were still missing, and seems like they are able to cooperate and coordinate with others. And that this character, whoever it is seen as male, which removes Kissy Missy, the pink Huggy, and Poppy from the running. The reasonable assumption that Huggy is Experiment 1006 is thanks to the fact that he's the main antagonist of this chapter. However, there are a couple things that I'd like to point out. Mainly the fact that if this experiment went missing, and was still missing at the end of this log, as well as them wanting to dispose of and contain their other experiments like some weird SCP Foundation, how was he back come the start of the game? And how is he where they decided to seemingly store the other experiments, since this was supposed to be locked up securely? Considering how Poppy is here, and presumably the others are as well, this must be their version of the SCP containment zone, right? Because if it is, it makes no sense for Huggy to be here if he is Experiment 1006. It's also worth mentioning that Experiment 1006 is seen as the template for how they want to create their other creatures. And like, why would the one that seems to be absolutely kill crazy be their template? That just seems like a bad idea, unless that's what they intended. Plus, they said that this experiment isn't actively seeking sustenance and finds no necessity for it, but Huggy is actively trying to kill and eat us from what the death screen seems to indicate. So what's the deal there? And just as Experiment 1006 Isn't He Beautiful could be referring to Huggy, couldn't it also be referring to us as well? I mean, all the other death lines are about us in one way or another, so why would this one be any different? It just seems like they were hyping this experiment up so much that it can't reasonably be Huggy Wuggy, especially since that experiment had escaped. And who comes back after a while? Us. It also ties into the we are a toy theory that's been circulating on the internet, since if we are a toy, we could very well be Experiment 1006 that fled after we realized how messed up everything was, but eventually we came back when Poppy sent us a letter. Which, I mean, that's a whole other can of worms, right? Like, how would Poppy know to send us a letter specifically? Cause that's a whole other thing I didn't think of. I'm thinking of it as I'm reading the script. Hold on. What? How did Poppy know to send us a letter? That's sus. That's mega sus. As I said last time, Poppy is a sussy baka. Plus, these kinds of revelations are nothing new to the indie horror scene. A twist like You Are a Toy that was an experiment is honestly expected at this point, especially with the standards that FNAF has set in the indie world. And we know that this series draws inspiration from FNAF since it's made by Mob Studios, started by Enchanted Mob, who has made plenty of FNAF-based Minecraft animations, including the Disconnected series of original music videos, which I used to watch that a lot, actually. I used to watch it to try to gain inspiration for FNAF lists. But with such a heavy amount of content relying on FNAF, it's only natural for FNAF to be an inspiration in Poppy Playtime, as well as Bendy and the Ink Machine, which is something that many people seem to point out in the comments of top 10 Scary Poppy Playtime Theories when I talked about the possibility of them being in the same universe, which was only meant to be so that I could include it in the thumbnail. So, because, you know, the people who watch the FNAF stuff would actually click on it at that point, but now that idea is actually seemingly stronger. And at 10, next villains. With Huggy Wuggy hopefully meeting his demise in Chapter 1, we have more chapters that will be needing villains. However, who will these villains be? It's possible that these villains will be other toys that we've seen around the facility in Chapter 1, via posters mostly. The pink Huggy, which is actually named Kissy Missy, Brawn the Dinosaur, Boogie Bot, Candy Cat, and Catbee are all possibilities for the next chapters, as well as Poppy herself, who will probably be the final villain if she is one at all, more on that later. But who will be the villain of Chapter 2 specifically? Well, MatPat seems to think that it's going to be Cappy, who was the only other toy featured on more than a poster in this chapter with the exception of Poppy herself, since we end up having to make a Cappy toy to move on in the game, and then that toy seemingly disappeared. However, I have no idea how they plan on making Cappy scary. Like, it's half bee, half cat. How is that supposed to terrifying me as bad as Huggy? Like, Huggy already looks pretty scary since he's just like a monster. He's basically, in essence, like a blue blob. But like a cat and a cat bee, like, unless I'm allergic, how are you actually supposed to make me scared? I'll be impressed if you do that, Enchanted Mob. I'll be impressed. Although it is also theorized that the machine that we use to create the Cappy toy is also what makes toys into humans, or humans into toys. In at 9, the other door. Now there is something that seemingly nobody in our comments wants to know, but something I myself had a question about ever since I watched Eddie VR play Poppy Playtime on his second channel. This question was, what about the first door that requires 2 hands that we see in Huggy Wuggy's main display room, I guess I should call it. And this is a popular enough question that Terrico actually talked about it on his channel. The quick answer is that you can't go back to this room after getting the red hand apparently, which is unfortunate. However, this leads fans to believe that this door will be involved in Chapter 2. Perhaps it's where the rest of the toys are, since when we left Chapter 1, we were on a catwalk above a who knows how deep hole, so getting back to that room is probably going to take some time. But since we should hopefully still have the grab pack, it wouldn't be unreasonable to assume that we would end up going back to this room and then unlocking that door. It was blocked by another hand for a reason, since if they didn't plan on actually using it, they wouldn't just put a door there, they would have just made it a wall. So it's most likely that we'll be seeing that room in Chapter 2, or at some point later on, that it leads to the rest of the experiments. And at 8, more grab pack. Speaking of the grab pack, will there be more to its mechanics in the coming chapters rather than just pulling things over and diverting power? There is plenty of fun stuff that they can do with the grab pack, I'm sure, like maybe tripping monsters, or maybe we can like throw objects around instead of just pulling them this time. The grab pack can be such a diverse tool that it can, in theory, do anything, especially since it can literally move power around. Like, because of that, we won't really question what else the grab pack is able to do. Like, oh, it launches nuclear warheads by accidentally picking up too many VHS tapes? Oh well, makes sense. Oh, it can actually create entirely new monsters just by being around the toys for too long while attached to someone? Oh, they're alright, fair enough. Like what? Wait, do we actually think that it's possible for the grab pack to actually be the reason that some of these toys are organic beings? I mean, it's a bit of a stretch, pun absolutely intended, but like I've said, anything the grab pack can do we just kinda need to accept, right? Huh, well, maybe it's this. And at 7, Poppy's power. Poppy's hair is meant to smell like poppies because, you know, that's her name. However, poppies don't really have all that much of a smell, unless we're talking about the ones made for a certain kind of substance. These opium poppies are used for various illicit substances. However, they're also very good at putting people to sleep. It was even used as a form of treatment when medicine wasn't advanced as it was today. And I mean, honestly, it should still be a treatment. So, could this have been the point behind Poppy's hair? Could this doll's power, I guess, actually be the ability to put things, or I guess other monsters, to sleep? And if this doll was shown to be able to keep kids calm and put them to bed, I guess. I'm sure a load of parents, especially in the 60s, would have been down for that. This had to have been mentioned for a reason. There's no way that they said, oh, her hair smells like poppies just because. And we know that the company behind Poppy and the others are certainly not the pinnacle of corporate decency. Definitely not getting the gold standard for how they treat literally the world. So it is possible that they could have done this and then not really cared about the consequences. And will this ability end up coming in useful? Possibly. And at 6, eradication. The idea that there's something bigger at stake here is something else that's been floating around the internet, thanks to specifically the deathline of "there are more lives at stake than just yours, wake up," which also can allude to dream theory, but haha, I ain't touching that with a 90-foot pole at this point. Actually, that would be hella hard to hold on to. I'm not touching this with anything, okay? The global massacre idea started because, well, I mean, like, come on. What else is going to cause more lives to be at stake here, other than toys actively trying to kill you? Because, like, mass toy genocide? You know what? Straight up, Toy Story. Plus, this only happens if you die and you don't end up getting rid of Huggy Wuggy at the end of the chapter, since, you know, he bashes his head multiple times, and hopefully, I really hope he's dead, okay? He definitely should be dead at this point, if he's an organic being. Plus, like, you know, an 11-foot tall monster who definitely wants to go on a mass killing spree. Yeah, with just one section of the trailer suggesting that it kills for fun and doesn't require sustenance if he is actually Experiment 1006. So yeah, well, like, what's the overall goal here? No idea. But with one chapter out, we can't really get all that much information about it. The only information we have is through a death line, so. A global massacre, though, would certainly be an interesting way for the series to go. Halfway through into number 5, the experiments. So we know that there are probably at least 6, but upwards of 1,006 experiments involving Playtime Co. and their desire to recreate Poppy, the perfect human toy hybrid. Most people believe that these experiments will be revealed to be the other toys that we learned about in chapter 1, but my question is, where would the other 1,000 experiments be if that is truly the number instead of just 6? Because, you know what, in my opinion, why would you start a numbering system at 1001? My thinking is that it's probably going to be the smaller toys. The small toys in the boxes that the children would actually get would explain the 1,000 additional experiments that we were told about. And it would honestly make sense company-wise, since they advertised Poppy as being the world's first truly intelligent doll. But if that is the case, how would they keep that promise if only that one for the commercial was actually, like, intelligent and part human? It would make sense for that to be the case, but advertising laws could in theory help prevent that. But courts also did say that Apple blatantly lying in one of their ads was fine, since apparently a new iPhone being a third the price and 3 times the speed was too unbelievable for it to be believed realistically, which now is definitely true because Apple cutting costs? Funny. They're gonna come out with 6 adapters. But still, if there are 1,000 other experiments lying around, I wouldn't be surprised if they're the small dolls like the ones we see at the start of chapter 1 in Huggy's room. You know, the ones in the boxes, and then there's the one that you can kick around. Thanks for Terrico for finding that. And at 4, tapes. The various tapes we found over the first chapter helped Mob Studios work in the lore of the story that they wanted to tell. However, with chapter 2 coming, what can we expect from these tapes? Really, it's up in the air since we aren't quite sure where the story is going, but we can assume that now since we've let Poppy out of her case, they will be about her. At least some of them will. The others will probably be about whatever enemy we're facing in this chapter, as well as maybe some more information about the process of turning humans into toys. Or if we are in fact Experiment 1006 instead of Huggy, then maybe we also get more information on that experiment as well, which I guess would be us. But if Huggy was 1006, it would make sense to refer to Experiment 1007 or 1005 in these tapes, which would probably be the enemy we were facing in that chapter. But even on that point, if 1006 is something they'd be trying to replicate, shouldn't there be more than just 6 experiments? Like, I've said this in other videos, but like, after all, they wouldn't stop after they finally got one right. Would they? Like, I wouldn't. That's like, oh, I finally got the settings on my 3D printer working perfectly, let's never print something again. It doesn't make sense. I don't have a 3D printer, but like, I want one. But like, that's kind of my thought process here. If you get it right, you don't just stop. Getting close to the end, and in number 3, Poppy's the villain. The prevailing idea about the game series overall is that Poppy will end up actually being the villain, and it makes sense. Her name is the title of the game, and she could be controlling the toys from inside her case. The fact that her name is on the game is kind of a dead giveaway. I mean, it's not like Freddy Fazbear was helpful in Five Nights at Freddy's, right? Well, this idea is also reinforced by the sheer creep factor we get when releasing her. "You opened my case" is said in such a chilling way that it's hard not to take that line as anything but a threat. She might as well just have put like that simple like smiling emoji, like the one with no cheeks or anything, just that one? Yeah, you know what I mean. And additionally, like, why was she being kept in a sealed glass case anyway? It's also concerning that after running away from a giant toy trying to kill us, we instantly end up releasing yet another toy that is known for being sentient in some form thanks to her being the world's first truly intelligent toy. And I mean, even if you're willing to be turned into a toy, being forced to stay in a glass case for who knows how many years is really going to be a downer. And then, you know, there's the whole we just narrowly escaped from another toy by the skin of our teeth. But yeah, open that case. What can go wrong? Are there no horror movies in these universes? Like, God! Penultimately, in at number 2, we are a toy. This is such an interesting theory that I felt the need to talk about it again. The idea that we ourselves are a toy is so seemingly off the rails that it fits perfectly within this story and just the indie game world in general. If people are being turned into monstrous versions of these toys, and Huggy Wuggy was supposedly experiment 1006, what if we are also an experiment? Starting off the game, we aren't really able to see any of our body, and this continues throughout the chapter. Only being able to grab stuff with the grab pack even at the start of the game. Cause we don't grab anything with our actual hands. We never see them. So the thing is, could we be a toy? Are we really human? Come on. Look at this logically. It would make sense if we are a toy, but the game didn't want us to know that yet, so it didn't show us literally us. It could also explain how we're being brought back to life over and over again, and that the one death line of death isn't permanent, since, you know, being a toy combined with a human would most likely not cause you to die permanently. I mean, just look at William Afton, for example. Especially if there is some other entity that's able to resurrect us. Look, I don't know, okay? But being a toy sounds like it could be where this game is going, along with the whole mass global extinction event kind of thing. We have a whole separate video on the subject, and that video also talks about if we are Experiment 1006 instead of Huggy, so feel free to check that out. Link is in the iCard. And finally, in at number 1, Poppy the Good Guy. The first chapter of Poppy Playtime ends with us opening Poppy's display case with the lights flickering and her saying, "You opened my case," in an absolutely freaky tone. But it also seems to be almost thankful in a way. This is also something that Matt Pat mentioned in his game theory episode on the subject. This also relates to who Matt believes is behind Poppy, or I guess who Poppy really is, and that's Stella, a woman who is obsessed with trying to live forever and bring joy to her children like her toys did her. And what better way to do that than being turned into a living toy? Well, okay, there's definitely better ways to go about that doesn't involve you becoming a frickin' toy, but hey, it's the indie game world. Plus, if Stella wanted to be a toy, she wouldn't be mad about being turned into one. She'd be delighted, but again, she wouldn't be happy about being sealed in a glass case. Or would she? I don't know what she's into. In at 10, Huggy's return. Now, after the trailer for Chapter 2 came out, I think it's fairly safe to say that Huggy Wuggy, or at least the one we fought in Chapter 1, Experiment 1006, is indeed dead. The symbolism in the first shot of the trailer says it all, unless that's meant to mean that Mommy is going to bring him back somehow. However, it's also worth noting that one of the Huggies that comes after us in a clip later on in that trailer is blue. So, could this be the same Huggy? I don't really think that it is, but it's technically possible. If this was indeed supposed to be a team of assault Huggies, I don't think 1006 would be there, because and if he was, we'd be fighting off 6 Huggies instead of 4. So seemingly the only 2 that are missing from this fight are Kissy Missy and 1006. And considering how Kissy is missing, I think it's because she's over mourning Huggy and trying to bring him back or something, maybe I don't know. But at least for this chapter, Huggy is hopefully dead. And maybe the assault of the Huggies is actually because of his death and the rest are mad at us. But this could all just be a ruse and we'll have to contend with Huggy again later on. We didn't see a corpse at the end of Chapter 1, so as we learned from FNAF, anything is possible in indie horror. In at 9, Poppy's side. There is a narrator in this trailer as well. Someone who's giving us the rundown and telling us that Mommy doesn't like visitors. Damn, Mommy, okay, I get it. You like your private time. You don't want a crowd. I get it, I respect it. However, this voice is most likely Poppy, unless it's a character that we haven't been introduced to yet. And if this is Poppy, it is kind of confirming the theories that people had about Chapter 1, where we thought that Poppy was going to be a passive and helpful character unlike Huggy, both due to her willingness to be a toy when she was human and her gratefulness at being released from her case. Although, there is still a possibility for kind of like a double cross, Circus Baby style, okay? Because now she's trying to guide us and she has a secret agenda. I'm absolutely positive of it. As to whether that secret agenda is going to be good for the player or not, we don't know. So unless this is a new character that wasn't introduced yet, this is definitely Poppy, since Mommy Longlegs' voice isn't used until the end of the trailer when she taunts the player. Or I guess technically taunts the audience, because we're not playing. And at 8, who is Huggy? Now, I think it's been fairly well established that the various monsters we're going to be facing throughout these chapters are humans turned into toys, instead of humans turned into animatronics. But while we seem to know the identity of Poppy, Stella Graber, we're unsure of who Huggy's human was, or even if it matters. Some consider Laith Pierre to be Huggy's human, and it's certainly possible, but as of yet unconfirmed, thus it remains a mystery. It could really be anyone, aside from us as the player, seemingly aside from Stella, or more from the researcher in the videotapes talking about how Experiment 1006 escaped. But at least we now know that Huggy is 1006, and not because of the other characters like Braun and Cappy, but instead he's 1006 because of the other iterations of Huggy that we seem to be interacting with in Chapter 2, Fly in a Web, which is already a creepy type because we all know how I feel about spiders. DJ Music Man is okay because he has 6 legs and not 8. And while Mommy and Long Legs only has 4 legs, there are a load of spider webs all over this chapter, okay? So I'd rather not. Plus, I mean, like a spider who makes you call her mommy? No thank you. And it's 7 chapters. While we know that chapter 2 is set to release sometime this spring, seemingly, hopefully, we don't know overall how many chapters they really plan on having. And if they have mentioned it or have said it somewhere in the past, forgive me. But even if they did, I don't know if we can really trust them. I mean, we were originally only supposed to get 3 FNAF games and here we are on number 9. So I don't think that we can really trust them. Any successful franchise will keep going as long as they can, especially when the company cares about sales. And considering some of the things that the community had to do to get the name of Mommy Longlegs before the trailer came out, because we didn't even get it in the trailer, I think we can all agree that they do indeed enjoy money, but I mean we all do. And before you ask, yes, I'm talking about those goddamn NFTs. Like, what were you thinking, Enchanted Mob? Like, very few gamers from what I've seen like the concept of NFTs, since it's basically EA microtransactions on illicit substances. So, I really don't know why you thought it would be a good idea to release 30,000 of them, only to sell 600, but I guess you get what you deserve. And at 6, Fallout. There is a reason that the toy factory went debunked in the first place. We don't really know what it is though. We have ideas, but the actual reason it crumbled is a mystery and quite the interesting concept, because every location has a story, right? Like a series of events that led to its end. Like how someone dropping a penny leads to someone finding that penny, selling it for $2, getting hot dogs because they got those $2, stumbling upon a wedding dress sale when your friend really needs a dress for her wedding, causing you both to camp out there all night, so you're exhausted the next day and you take a nap at your partner's house, but you walk in on your partner's roommate being weird and in their shock causes them to fall down, break their toe, and be unable to run in the New York City Marathon. So your other friend goes in their stead, causing his legs to be unable to function and then trapping him on the subway. So you jump the subway turnstile to save him and then get arrested in the process and sentenced to community service the morning of your flight to a big job interview, causing you to miss out on the opportunity. Every building has a story like that, but instead of missing a job, it's becoming defunct and abandoned. But like, what's the story of Playtime Co? I don't know. And yes, that was a long-winded How I Met Your Mother reference. Halfway through into number 5, human toys. The idea that humans are turned into toys is a pretty solid one and it makes a load of sense. However, my original idea was that only some of the toys were made into humans. For example, only Poppy used in the commercials was a human, while the rest were actual toys. But now I'm thinking that it might be every single toy in this factory. Whether they be oversized, commercial props, or just normal toys, they could all be human, and that's pretty damn insane. Like Fazbear Entertainment is doing some pretty questionable stuff, sending out animatronics to families when they know damn well that they're on the fritz, pun intended. But sending out toys to kids that are actually humans changed into toys is a whole other thing. Like, who at the Living Tombstone thought that was a good idea? Or even like an alright idea. Like, sure, making a human into a doll for a commercial, I'd kind of understand. Like, there's a whole industry of food designers that make every food item in commercials look their best, like using mashed potatoes instead of ice cream. But this seems like it's just a little bit much, and I went to school for advertising, so I think I have at least enough knowledge to say that, because like, goddamn, that's weird. And at 4, Under Wraps. How have they kept their whole our toys are humans thing under wraps so well? I mean, like, seriously. We see that Huggy, when he hits the pipe on the way down in chapter 1, ends up bleeding. And we know that the Huggy from the beginning of chapter 2's trailer isn't the same one because there's no pool of blood. But kids are rough as hell with toys. Like, I would throw mine around, I would bash them on stuff. How did Playtime Co. keep the whole these are all humans thing under the radar if the toys they sent out are gonna start bleeding? Or like, is that the point? Is that why they got closed down? Like, not because Huggy got loose, but because the toys started bleeding? I mean, getting shut down because your toys start bleeding makes more sense than animatronics leaking blood and then nobody investigating. Since this is, after all, from Enchanted Mob, a channel that made plenty of Minecraft, FNAF animations and music videos, so there would be a bit of FNAF inspiration behind these games. Maybe they had things go down this way to like aim to be a bit more realistic. Like maybe they saw me calling out FNAF for this kind of crap and they figured that they'd make sure that I couldn't do that with their game, but alas, here I am doing it anyway. I doubt Enchanted Mob watches any of these videos. I only feel like a little famous when someone comments on my TikTok saying like, oh, it's the FNAF guy from YouTube. That's the only time I feel even slightly famous. And at 3, the process. What is the process for turning humans into toys? Like, is it scientific? Is it ritualistic? Is it demonic? What is the process to make toys out of humans? Like, in such a way that they would actually bleed and need to eat and like have organs and stuff. Because if it was demonic, I feel like it would be more of like in the realm of just like transporting the soul of the person into the stuffed toy. But this time around, I have absolutely no idea how they actually do this kind of thing. And I don't think that the toy machine we see in chapter 1 actually has anything to do with it. It feels to me like more of a MacGuffin, like something to distract us. That machine doesn't really have any significance aside from just making the Cappy toy that lets us move on. Out of just toy parts, might I add. No humans involved in that toy making process aside from us getting the items moving. Like, I doubt that we will ever actually get an answer because, like, how do you explain something like that? But hey, it's still something interesting to think about. But ultimately, in at number 2, the player. The idea that we ourselves are a toy is so seemingly off the rails that it fits perfectly within this story, or the story that we think could be playing out. If people are being turned into monstrous versions of these toys, and Huggy Wuggy was supposedly Experiment 1006, what if we're also an experiment? Starting off the game, we don't see any of our own body, not even our hands, being only able to grab stuff with the grab pack given to us at the start of the game. So, yeah, why would we not be able to use our own hands if we're human? Like, that would just be instinctive, right? Like, if there's a toy in front of me, I'm not gonna, like, push a button to grab it. I'm gonna just reach my hand out. Well, it would make sense if we are a toy, but the game didn't want us to know that yet. It could also explain how we're brought back to life over and over, and that one death line of death isn't permanent, since being a toy combined with a human would most likely not end up dying permanently. Maybe. Especially if there is some other entity that's able to resurrect us like Poppy. I don't know, but like being a toy kinda sounds like this could be where the story is going. And finally, in at number 1, the story. The biggest mystery of this game seems to be the actual story. Like, we don't know what any character in this series has planned. We don't know Poppy's true intentions. We don't know why we came back to the goddamn Playtime Co. factory, aside from a cruelly written letter that, let's be honest, nobody would have really believed. Things just don't quite add up, and that's the whole point of an indie horror game. Things aren't supposed to add up. That would make it way too easy. And while some people online do have ideas about what's really going on in Poppy Playtime, those are just theories. They have evidence, but they aren't confirmed. And with so many different interpretations about what could actually be the story, we really have to take them with a grain of salt until we know more. Some seem more likely than others, but I mean, who really gets what they expect in an indie horror game? The people making it, exactly. The creators and Steam gets what they want. And with the creators of Poppy Playtime making missteps like hiding clues in merch and even NFTs, yeah, you thought I was done with that? No. We can't be sure that we know where their story is heading. And yes, I'm not kidding, they actually made NFTs that caused such backlash that they had to apologize and actually promise not to do it again. So yeah, we really don't know what they're thinking. Clearly. And at 10, the cult. Whenever there is a case of a missing group of people in any game, not even just horror games, the classic question of were they in a cult will be asked. And honestly, it seems like it could be possible in Poppy Playtime, just more unlikely than some other options. Even if those options are stranger, which is weird. But I do see a possibility where these workers ended up forming some sort of cult surrounding the perfect toy of Poppy before trying to recreate her success in other toys only to fail miserably. They would end up worshipping Poppy like a god if this was the case. And what do we see? We see a room built specifically for her in a glass case, with a huge Poppy painting around the front door. While yes, this would end up later having graffiti that said not to enter this room, this doesn't seem like the actions of a group that fears Poppy. Why not encase her in steel to make sure that she couldn't escape? Or why paint a giant Poppy around the door when you could just pull a Henry Emily and seal the room off? It doesn't make sense, unless, at least for a time, they worshipped her like a goddess. And at 9, death messages. The messages we get when Huggy Wuggy kills us are certainly interesting. They set the theorist's senses off instantly since there is certainly more going on here. With lines like "don't die just yet," "more lives are at risk than just yours," "it's too early to die," and "I need you alive," there are bound to be many questions just based on us dying. Like, who's talking to us? Are they resurrecting us or are we actually dead? And what the hell is actually going on here? These are all good questions, and most people assume that Poppy is the one who's talking to us us during these death screens, but I'm not so sure if this is the case. It could simply be another character we have yet to be introduced to. With only one chapter out of seemingly 6 currently playable, we don't really know everyone we need to. It could easily be something like the owner of the company who's hiding deep in the bowels of the building who's using a loudspeaker, or someone or something with supernatural abilities who's constantly resurrecting us. And at 8, next, villains. With Huggy Wuggy seemingly meeting his end in chapter 1, we have more chapters that will be needing villains. However, who will these villains be? It's possible that these villains will be the other toys that we've seen around the facility in chapter 1. The Pink Huggy, Brawn the Dinosaur, Boogiebot, Catbee, and Candy Cat are all possibilities for the next chapters, as well as Poppy herself, who will probably be the final villain if she is one at all. More on that later. But who will be the villain of chapter 2? MatPat seems to think that it's going to be Cappy, who was the only other toy featured on more than a poster in this chapter, with the exception of Poppy herself, since we have to make a Cappy toy to move on with the game, and then that toy seemingly disappears. However, I have no idea how they plan on making Cappy scary. Like, what? It's half bee, half cat. How is that supposed to terrify me? Unless, like, I have allergies to both. Like, Huggy already looks scary enough. Just the fact that he's like a monster, and then you can just add teeth to it. But a cat and a Catbee? It doesn't really seem that freaky to me. Although I will be interested to see how they do it. And at 7, Grab Pack. The Grab Pack is certainly an interesting item. Used as in essence giant sticky hands, the first half of the Grab Pack is granted to us at the very beginning of the game and is a key mechanic in the game, being the main way to solve most of the game's puzzles. However, one of the big questions is why do we need this Grab Pack? Other than electricity puzzles, grabbing tape, and blocking progression, why are we limited to using this? It's almost as if we don't have any actual hands to use, but that raises the question, how are we able to use the Grab Pack if that was the case? Since we would normally just assume that we're just pulling triggers on some handles or something. But even before getting the Grab Pack, we don't see any of our body, not even our normal hands. And why is that? Well, maybe there's more of an explanation coming later on. And at 6, Poppy's a good guy. The first chapter of Poppy Playtime ends with us opening Poppy's display case with the lights flickering and her saying, "You opened my case," in what also seems to be an almost thankful tone. This is also something that MatPat mentioned in his game theory episode on the subject. This also relates to who Matt believes is behind Poppy, or I guess who Poppy really is, and that's Stella, a woman who is obsessed with trying to live forever and bringing joy to children like her toys did for her. And what better way to do that than being turned into a living toy? Well, there are actually plenty of ways that you could do that don't involve having to convert your living flesh into a doll that talks to kids, but hey, it's an indie game. Plus, if Stella wanted to be a toy, she wouldn't be mad about being turned into one, she'd be delighted. And now, thanks to you opening her door, she can go and bring that joy to children. Or will she? Halfway through into number 5, Global Massacre. The idea that there is something bigger at stake here is another idea that's been floating around the internet. Thanks to the death line of "there are more lives at stake than just yours, wake up," which could also allude to Dream Theory, but I'm not touching that one with a top 10-foot pole. Get it? The Global Massacre idea started because, well, what else is going on to cause more lives to be at stake here other than toys actively trying to kill you? Plus, this only happens if you die and don't get rid of Huggy Wuggy at the end of the chapter. Since he bashes his head multiple times, I'm going to guess that they're definitely dead at this point. Plus, this thing is like 11 feet tall and definitely wants to go on a mass killing spree, with one section of the trailer suggesting that it just kills for fun and doesn't require sustenance. So what's the overall goal here? Well, we still don't know. With only one chapter out, we can't really gather all that much evidence, but alas, we're guessing anyway. Mostly because I wanted a break from FNAF, and this seems like something you'd all be into. And at 4, Poppy's hair. Poppy's hair is meant to smell like poppies because that's her name. However, poppies themselves don't really have much of a smell unless you're talking about the ones made for a certain kind of substance. Or the ones used to make a certain kind of substance, I should say. Those poppies are used for various illicit substances, however, they are also good at putting people to sleep. It was even used as a form of treatment when medicine wasn't really as advanced as it is today. So, could this have been the point behind Poppy's hair? Could this doll have actively been selling to parents instead of their kids? If this doll was shown to be able to keep kids calm or put them to sleep, I'm sure a load of parents, especially in the 1960s when Poppy was invented, would have been down for it, especially if the kids were like me. I literally at one point tried to run into traffic. I knew what adulthood would be like. And we know that the company behind Poppy and the others are certainly not the pinnacle of corporate decency. Definitely not setting the gold standard for how to treat their employees, so is it possible that they could have done this and not really cared about the consequences? It's an indie game. Absolutely. Getting close to the end, and in number 3, people are toys. One of the biggest theories that I've seen that seems to be going in the right direction is that the monster toys we've been dealing with are actually humans. But not the classic humans possess these toys way, but rather they're made of human flesh and bone. These are intentionally a human monstery toy hybrid that was an attempt to recreate the success of Poppy. It's worth noting that when we take care of Huggy, he does bash his head off multiple things on the way down. However, these hits also end up leaving blood behind. And Poppy's eyes are really realistic. Now, an animatronic wouldn't leave blood behind if it's bashed its head, so that removes the possibility of these being animatronics, thank God. So the only thing that would really leave blood is an organic being with flesh. And as we learn in a moment from the trailer for the game, Huggy Wuggy has a digestive tract. When showing Poppy's voice box, it's covered and even dripping with blood. So what's the deal here? Well, the employees did disappear, right? And the game even tells us that they never left the building, so where are they? They're in the toys. Penultimately, in at number 2, FNAF Multiverse. Okay, look now, I know this is going to make a lot of Poppy heads mad, but this is something that this channel is in essence obligated to talk about. Now, do I believe FNAF and Poppy Playtime share a universe or even a multiverse? No, not at all. But am I talking about this for the thumbnail? Abso-freaking-lutely. So, right off the bat, there are some similarities that we should point out between Poppy Playtime and FNAF. 1. They're both indie horror titles. They both also feature childhood figures turned killers, and that in some way all of these characters are human, be it by possession in FNAF's case, or by literally made of flesh to be your tormentor like in Poppy Playtime. However, are there any other similarities that we can use in-universe? Well, while there may be no references to FNAF in the games from what I could tell, this does seem to be the story of FNAF just on another Earth, where instead of making Circus Baby and the Funtime animatronics, William could have just made the Poppy doll instead. Notice how the two share a similar design. And while yes, Poppy was made in the 60s, maybe this is just what happened if William was born earlier than he was supposed to be. I mean, of course, this is all for fun, and is most certainly not the case, but it's fun to speculate anyway, right? Plus, thumbnail. Finally, in number 1, we are a toy. This is such an interesting theory that I felt the need to talk about it. The idea that we ourselves are a toy is so seemingly off the rails that it fits perfectly within this story. If people are being turned into monstrous versions of these toys, and Huggy Wuggy was Experiment 1006, what if we are Experiment 1007, or are going to be 107? Starting off the game, we don't really see any of our own body, not even our hands like I mentioned before, only being able to grab stuff with the grab pack given to us at the start of the game. So why would we not be able to use our own hands if we are human? That would just be instinctive, right? Well, it would make sense if we were a toy, but the game didn't want us to know that yet. It could also explain how we're brought back to life over and over, and that one death line of death isn't permanent, since being a toy combined with a human would most likely not let us die permanently, especially if there is some other entity that's able to resurrect us. Now, I don't know, but being a toy sounds like it could certainly be where this game is going. It wouldn't be that big of a leap, honestly. And after dealing with FNAF for like what, 2 years at this point, I feel like this is not that big of a deal. It hasn't been 2 years, it's been like 1.5 maybe. In a 10, FNAF reference. With all the inspiration for FNAF that Poppy Playtime is surely dealing with, considering how Enchanted Mob is the one behind the game series, yes, that Enchanted Mob, the one known for the disconnected series of Minecraft FNAF animated music videos. Again, I will never understand the fascination with animating Minecraft versions of other games for original songs, but whatever. But with FNAF being such a big part of Enchanted Mob's history and channel growth, there would surely be some inspiration from FNAF present in the games, whether it's the kids' toy motif or the humans becoming toys somehow. The most likely scenario is that FNAF was a big part in generating this idea, so seeing a quick little nod to the franchise, whether in passing, statement, or a hidden Easter egg would be something I'm sure all Enchanted Mobs and FNAF's fans would go kinda nuts for, and would surely be the talk of the internet for at least a day, especially with the new FNAF game releasing in less than 10 days currently, so yeah. In at 9, Experiment 1006. More references to the success of Experiment 1006 are certainly still on the table, despite the apparent death of Huggy Wuggy. Now, I still firmly believe that we as the player are Experiment 1006 instead of actually it being Huggy, and more references to this mysterious character in the next chapter would surely solidify this theory as correct. Most people believe that Experiment 1006 is Huggy because the tapes referencing this guy are in the same chapter as Huggy. But that's like really jumping the shark. You're jumping the shark onto conclusions here, since it's the first event in this series, and we don't know how many chapters there's going to be, because chapter 1 wasn't the end. We knew that there would be more chapters, unlike when we got the first FNAF game. So the mention of 1006 in chapter 2 would easily cancel out that argument from everyone who believes that Huggy is 1006. Or maybe we'll hear about 1007 and it actually will be confirmed that Huggy was in fact 1006. I don't know. Who do you think will be the next villain though? 1007 or 1005? I think they would have taken 1005 out back and kind of like popped it between the eyes, you know? But after making a successful version, I doubt that they would have stopped or have been so willing to discard their experiments easily. They're like, oh, well, maybe they'll stop this hunger for human flesh. And it ain't more grab pack. With the popularity of the grab pack and its mechanics, it's possible that the grab pack's return is followed with some new features that the game adds. More puzzles and whatnot to really make the grab pack fun. I want to be able to personally be able to pull myself around with the pack, kind of like a weird Spider-Man thing. Like if Huggy was about to get me, I could like grab the ceiling and pull myself away, just to give me like a few seconds to accept my fate, or to like use the ceiling and the rafters as like monkey bars and make my grand escape. That's probably why they made the majority of the Huggy chase in like vents and stuff, so that I couldn't use my biggest brain plays to make a sweet escape. Also because apparently it looks like the world just doesn't work like that. Or at least this world doesn't work like that. The grab pack isn't strong enough to keep my lanky ass suspended apparently. It's a shame really. And it's 7 puzzles. I think that a new chapter comes with a set of expectations. Like, we breezed through the puzzles in chapter 1, so with chapter 2, I'm expecting to see some good mind stumpers. I want to be so mad about the puzzles that I have to quit for an hour, go take a coffee break, and then come back to try it again. That's the level of challenge I want here. Poppy Playtime has the ability to do incredible things, but if they let the same things happen over and over again with a different villain, I don't think it will do as well as it can. It's like how FNAF nights get more and more difficult. And with that, I also don't want it to fall subject to the Back to the Future curse, where everything just happens the same way, just in another time period. Like, I love the Back to the Future movies, but come on. Like, we solve some puzzles, get chased in some specific area that the chapter is titled after, and then the antagonist falls into manure. I don't want that, okay? I don't want that. I want each chapter to be its own thing and excite me, and I'm sure they will. And at 6, Poppy. Given that the title of the game is Poppy Playtime, Poppy making an appearance in every chapter seems like a given, especially after we released her at the end of chapter 1. So I'm guessing that we will almost certainly be seeing her at some point in chapter 2. Unless they pull some kind of crazy thing that like, oh, she's super fast and now we have to find her, like some long game of hide and seek. Although that would make total sense, given the fact that it's called Poppy Playtime, and during playtime, kids could sometimes play hide and seek. Oh god, did I just come up with the rest of the game? Either way, I think it's basically set in stone that we will find Poppy in this chapter, and probably even as a prominent character, if not the villain. Halfway through into number 5, Candy Cat. Candy Cat is a toy produced by Playtime Co. It is most likely able to eat candies with its unnaturally long tongue, which I'm sure Reddit is going to have a lot of fun with. And currently it's only featured on posters, unlike other mascots in chapter 1. Candy Cat is a bluish cat with a long red tongue and 2 tear-like markings on deep blue on the sides of its face. And they have a white snout along with like white triangle fur above it, and as well they have white paws. They also have a blue tail and 4 blue stumpy legs. It's adorable. There's a organically shaped splotch of dark blue on the toy's back, and its cat-like stubby ears are the same deep blue as the splotch and the facial markings. Although I think it's worth taking extreme note of that the face marks do indeed look like tears. It's like crying profusely. Like you're on the Me channel, right? And you make a Me sad and they start crying. That's what it looks like. Candy Cat was created in 1979 by Playtime Co. and it was likely created with the intent of eating candy that kids give to it, which I mean is weird. We don't know what Candy Cat is going to be like as an antagonist. However, it is possible that Candy Cat will appear in the next chapter as a villain, either alongside Poppy if she is a villain, or against the player and Poppy if Poppy is good. It's certainly not the most likely villain, but it's still a possibility nonetheless. And at 4, Brawn. I think Braun is actually the more likely villain for Chapter 2, since so far in the trailers he's the only other character we've seen in the flesh moving, whereas the other characters are either static in the trailers or aren't there at all. Braun is a bright red dinosaur, possibly a brontosaurus based on his name, with small black eyes, a roundish stomach, stumpy legs, a long tail, and a long neck. Obviously he's a dinosaur. His underbelly and cheeks are a light pale yellow, and his cartoon has large goofy black eyes with a friendly smile. Yet his monster version's eyes are completely black, boring into the player's soul, and his mouth is an unsettling wide smile, kinda like me. In Chapter 1, a doll of Braun is found in the corner, but the doll's head is removed from the torso, and the neck is missing and cannot be found. All the legs and the tail are missing as well, and the wall behind the doll and the floor, seem to be covered in blood. This, with the combination of the blood-soaked Braun in the trailer, makes me think that we will have to return to Huggy's room in Chapter 2 and get all of the pieces of Braun, which are probably behind the door that needed the red grab pack hand to open. So I think we're gonna go back there, open that door, have to reassemble Braun, and then you know what happens. Getting close to the end, and in number 3, Kissy Missy. Kissy Missy's appearance is very similar to Huggy Wuggy. Like Huggy, she's tall, slender, and has thick pink fur rather than Huggy's signature blue. The rest of her features, such as her blue bow, yellow hands and feet, and eyes, are also similar to Huggy's, with the exception of her eyelashes and eye color, and she's also pink. She also seems to have a very elastic and flexible build, just like Huggy Wuggy, or if you don't know what Poppy Playtime is and you're just watching this because you found it, like Gumby. With Huggy Wuggy, what you see in the name is generally what you get. His premise was to hug children, and his name was a play on words. Going on that same logic, Kissy Missy's purpose would probably be to kiss children, which is kinda creepy, but given that she's a female character, I guess people would consider it motherly, because you know, guys are creepy. Recently though, it has been confirmed that Kissy Missy is Huggy's love interest. So the story could go that Kissy comes after you for being the cause of her poor, sweet, innocent Huggy's death. However, this is unlikely and probably will be reserved until the end, given that she is the most anticipated character to be seen now, just because everyone loves Huggy. And being able to start and end the series with a giant inflatable tube man ripoff would be like nice bookends. But ultimately, in at number 2, Catbee. Catbee is first and foremost properly introduced when the player creates a new toy in the Make a Friend machine, just before the vent chase in Chapter 1. It also makes attendance in the Chapter 1 trailer and by the Poppy room, where they are shown to be damaged and hung. Their back, right forelimb, and tail appear to have been ripped off, and their exterior has just been covered in blood. The undamaged form of Catbee though resembles a four-legged yellow cat featuring black stripes and 2 antennae. To the further side of the 2 antennae are also cat ears, and Catbee has a white snout, black nose, and thin black eyebrows, 2 black eyes with eyelashes, and 4 black stripes on its face. It has a white scruff on its chest, and it looks like a cat bee. That's the best way I can describe it. It looks like a cat that is also a bee. The majority of people do believe that Catbee is the planned antagonist for Chapter 2, and I say the majority because based on comments of almost all of our videos, you all, or at least most of you, watched Game Theory, and Matt Pat believed that Catbee was the next antagonist since you have to build him in the Make a Friend machine, and usually, according to the comments, what Matt Pat says is law. I still think it's gonna be Braun, but I guess we'll see. Finally, and at number 1, Huggy Wuggy. Huggy Wuggy is a tall, slender creature covered in thick, bright blue fur. His arms and legs are several feet in length and end in large yellow hands and feet, kinda like Mickey Mouse on roids. The hands have large Velcro straps on them, and the feet possess 4 digits including thumbs, though they are fused together and unable to move individually, with the exception of the thumbs. His torso is stout and somewhat disproportionately small in comparison to his limbs, but that's what makes him cute. Why am I describing him? We all know who this guy is, and despite having a nice fall, some fear that he'll be back for the winter in the next chapter of Poppy Playtime. But could this be possible? Honestly, personally, I doubt it. But it's something that a lot of people want to see, and considering the fact that we don't know anything about how Enchanted Mob is going to be operating this series, we don't know if the death is set in stone or if Huggy will always come back. I guess we'll have to wait and find out, but I'm pretty sure he's permadead. Like anything that brought him back again would be too FNAF-like, so I don't think they would go that route. First, we have to discuss what the story of Poppy Playtime is and if we can relate it to anything currently in this world. What we know about the company that seems to be the main antagonist of the Poppy Playtime series called Playtime Company is also basically the story of the game. They seemingly hit it big in the 1960s with the release of Poppy, the world's first truly intelligent toy. This Poppy doll put them on the map, marking them as the king of toys until dolls fell out of style in the late 70s, causing Playtime Co. to have to update their repertoire and come out with newer toys like Huggy Wuggy, Candy Cat, and others. This helped them bring back some of the business they lost, but this didn't seem like enough. They soon began seemingly experimenting with more realistic dolls in an attempt to recreate Poppy's success. Because let's face it, even if there was a truly intelligent version of this doll, not every version of Poppy would be truly intelligent like that, okay? Only the one they used in commercials and later that we released at the end of the chapter would actually be a person. Just like how ice cream in commercials is really mashed potatoes so it doesn't melt. However, this then brings us to the events of the tape unknown, the final tape in which, quote, final log in relation. Experiment 1006, the prototype. Coordination and cooperation is evidently within his skill set, as well as the skill set of all other experiments of his type. Though still missing, today's events are in no doubt relation to him. His absence was a flawed scientific process, which should have under no circumstances been left unaccounted for. That's why I'm making this log, so that the same mistake won't be made twice. Any future experiments will need to be contained and disposed of in a secure location. I'm not worried about myself. One breakthrough and I'll be back. We must forge onwards in the name of science, but for those who are beneath us, understand it or not. And note, despite the horrible grammar, this then caused the company to seal away their experiments in an underground bunker, which we seemingly explore in chapter 1. At least, hopefully that's the thing we explore, otherwise they didn't do that and we're all screwed. But is this something that we all really see happening in real life? From my research, I couldn't really find anything. And Mob Games is also claiming that any similarities to other entities is purely coincidental and subconscious, so any real life inspiration also seems to be out the window. However, we can tackle this much like we did the What If Bendy and the Ink Machine Was Real video, where we look to see if there's any company that seems like it would be willing to do these kinds of things. Usually, I'd say Disney, but they aren't really in the toy business all that much. They only use that market to capitalize on the popularity of their characters, which is understandable if you're a corporation who doesn't care about their employees and just wants money. But are there really any toy companies in this same situation that can benefit from turning their employees into living toys to get back on the map? The biggest toy company you can probably think of is Hasbro, and it's understandable why. They seem to be basically everywhere. However, in 1991, they acquired a particular company called Kenner Products. Simply known as Kenner, they were an American toy company founded in 1946. Throughout its history, the Kenner brand produced several highly recognizable toys and merchandise lines, including action figures like the original Star Wars characters, Jurassic Park, Batman, as well as die-cast models. The company, however, was closed by Hasbro in 2000. Well, the year 2000. However, being acquired by Tonga in 1987, who were honestly more about trucks and vehicles, when Kenner was more of an action figure company, would certainly be considered the beginning of the end. And with the characters they made being so popular, they would certainly benefit from being able to claim that these toys are sentient, or the world's first truly intelligent toys. But this is where the issues come into play, since if we really want to know what would happen if Poppy Playtime was real, we need to think about what's happening in the games, with, you know, giant sentient toy monsters chasing us. Yeah, that part. Well, Hasbro is a $5.1 billion company, so I think it's safe to say that they care about making money. Not only that, but with Kenner Products having been shut down, they could easily benefit from a way to get Kenner back on the map. Or at least something similar to Kenner. I'm not sure how like reopening a company you shut down works in the US. Honestly, I don't even know how it works in Canada, so the US is an absolute mystery. But if Hasbro suddenly came out saying that they have the world's first truly intelligent toys, I don't think anyone would really care. But what about the giant humanitarian characters who want to eat us? And yes, I said humanitarian, not humanitarian, because humanitarian is something else, and I'm talking about someone who eats exclusively people. Although now I think about it, humanitarian is also might just eat people. Well, either way, that would be a little more difficult to explain though. Although I think it's safe to say that they wouldn't be creating these monsters intentionally, since, you know, a family getting eaten by your toys not only cuts down on your client base, but also kinda gives your company a bad rep. Well, unless it's the FNAF universe, apparently. I think Hasbro would attempt to avoid this, but failures are inevitable in the pursuit of science, and honestly, they wouldn't really know about it until the first one came along. So how would they deal with those? Simple. I kind of explained it in that Bendy video. Yeah, they would simply pop a bullet between the eyes of the ones who didn't work properly. Those who weren't the ideal template, like Experiment 1006. Corporations and corporate America have a lot of shady dealings going down, even in real life, not just in movies. So offering a few failed experiments is nothing new, I'm sure. As my professor used to say when I was learning advertising in college, don't be afraid to kill off your babies. Not even kidding, that's the exact wording. What that means is, like, if something doesn't work, you gotta get rid of it even if it was your idea. Oh my god, Lori, you kinda scarred me, although it prepared me for FNAF. And I'm sure that the same philosophy of killing your babies is followed in the corporate world, although to a more extreme case in this scenario, because some of them might actually be babies. And while the science may be impossible to actually create human toys, I'm sure that if there was the technology, people would be using it. And this would probably be the result. So, is Poppy Playtime real? No, but if it was, should we be scared? Yes, and we should be scared without it, honestly. Because to quote Bill Nye, the world's on fucking fire. But it would be even worse if we had giant toys that came to want to eat us. Man, how would like the toy versus human war go? I kind of want to see that. Is that going to be like chapter 7 of Poppy Playtime? Because like I want to fight some toys. I want to take the grab pack and make a fists and just shoot out giant fists at Huggy Wuggy. Because we know he's not dead. I hope he is, but we know he's not. He always comes back. Everyone always comes back. Real life toys, I feel like Hasbro might do it, but honestly, I think Disney would do it even more. Can you imagine, like, Disney turning their toys into people? If Disney had access to turn toys into people, they would turn the toys of their characters into people and then have them at the Disney parks. And then they would have their real characters. And then they could have even weirder characters than like just like the actual like humanoid characters. They could have like a real Jabba the Hutt. They could have a real Jabba the Hutt just like slithering. Does he slither, or he's like a slug, right? Like how do slugs count as like slithering? Is that what they do, or do they just slide? I don't know. It's like the immortal snail thing. Is he slithering? I don't think so. He's sliding in that would hurt. Ow, Jesus. Okay, but yeah, no. Disney would absolutely do this. I didn't want to use Disney, but I'm going. It's not like Disney's gonna sponsor us anyway. Disney would absolutely turn their employees into toys and then put those toys in their parks. Hands down.